At the end of the day, the issue that will always face the punishment system is, does the punishment fit the crime? And with regards to punishment, one has to look at the factors of, will it deter a party from conducting themselves in a matter, and is there a possibility of a person rehabilitating themselves? The aspect of the death penalty has always been contentious because of A, the ills of the past, and B, it's been a worldwide political phenomenon. Whether it's going to act as a deterrence factor is debatable. And the death penalty as a true deterrence factor is probably not there, but it certainly is there with regards to a punishment factor of when the punishment should fit the crime. The fact remains that a person who's been handed down multiple life sentences due to aspects of gender-based violence for murder, multiple rapes, serial killers who've been also, if one looks at the history with, say, for example, a person like a Moses Tole, for instance, realistically, the death penalty might not be a deterrence. It might be a befitting end to also deal with the scourge that is actually affecting South Africa. Nobody's saying that there must be a death penalty case every time there's an altercation between a husband and their wife. But at the same time is when you've got these massive consequences and ramifications because of the violent behavior that's taken place, certainly as a fitting punishment, the death penalty, when there's a loss of life and a loss and a danger to when dealing with gender-based violence, not only just women but children as well, that should in actual fact be on the cards, and there's ways in the judicial system to manage that sentence and apply it properly.
And I'd like us to look at that a little bit later on, but for now, I'd like to focus on the two arguments and the two scenarios when it comes to issues of the death penalty. One is, would it be a deterrent for the crime? The second one is, would it be a punishment that's befitting of the crime? In the arguments that have been put forward thus far, the main argument has always been that it would be a deterrent to crime, and that, as you say, has not been proven. At the Constitutional Review Committee, which met in November of 2020, that seemed to be the thrust of the argument, but not so much the second part, which you have now put forward, which is asking the question, what is a punishment that befits that crime? Why is it that has not been the stance that has been put forward in such debates?
Unfortunately, the issue of a death penalty has always been a political debate, not only in South Africa because of our history, but worldwide, even in a place, for example, like the United States, where one has got different federal laws. Every state is different. We've got several states that endorse a death penalty while others do not endorse a death penalty. It's almost, if one could say, the moral compass of, does it justify taking another person's life? But in a situation, and that once again deals with the issue of the deterrence factor can't be the overriding factor. It is, at the end of the day, is that an adequate punishment? If one takes a look at a history, and we've seen grievous crimes and violence perpetuated not only against women but against men and children by individuals. And when you hear that a baby is raped, will a jail sentence rehabilitate that person? The chance is highly unlikely that it will ever stop them from reoffending. So in that type of thing, nobody's saying, you know what, there might have been an issue that the person is psychologically disturbed. But if you've got somebody who's convicted of multiple counts of such conduct and such grievous conduct and such grievous violence, then you are dealing with a person who is befitting of that crime, and it is then for the state to present the case and to enable the judiciary to allocate the right type of resources to ensuring that a matter is heard properly. We're dealing in specific categories. We're not dealing into other aspects of the death penalty because of past ills and that type of thing. We're dealing with it on a very specific type of level, and that relates to the issue of violent crimes and the results of that. The fact is that if you end up finding a child is raped, that child is not going to, even if they survive, they have been broken both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There is no coming back. And in that way, does the punishment fit the crime for destroying another person's life? That is where the debate must in actual fact come. And in certain regards, then there should be an affirmation for the death penalty in those situations.
And on that very point, Ian, that you've just highlighted now, it was at the very same Constitutional Review Committee where one of the ANC MPs said, and I quote, "It's not in the spirit of the Constitution to reinstate the death penalty." I asked then, if we're preserving the rights of the perpetrator of the crime and applying the principles of the Constitution to them, what about those who have been raped? What about those who have been murdered? What about their rights? What Constitution then protects them? How does one get justice in a situation like this and when an argument of this nature is put forward?
The fact is that the Constitution also agrees to a right to life. And that's one of our basic fundamentals, the right to dignity, equality, and life. The reality is, whether it's in the spirit or not, I didn't read anywhere in the Constitution where we have a right to rape, pillage, and plunder. And from that perspective, one must balance the rights, where it becomes an issue of restitution for the people versus retribution and vengeance against them. And that, once again, relates to what is most befitting in the circumstances. Nobody is saying, well, let's allocate the death penalty for getting pulled over for going 120 in a 60 zone. You're dealing with very specific type of cases that are going to render that. So if one takes the political debate of the history and the ills of our past, then one must actually take a look and say, okay, let us deal with what the consequences are and what is the rights of the victim. That also has been engaged in our Constitution. This isn't about curing the ills of the past. This is a different argument of saying our Constitution also allows rights to the rights of the victim should be higher than those rights to the perpetrator.
And one of the reasons, Ian, that have been put forward for being against the death penalty is that during the apartheid era, there are many people who were executed and who were innocent victims. And so what the government is trying to ensure is that we do not replicate that same history here. Under what scenarios would a death sentence, you believe, actually be appropriate?
Let me put it in this way. There's better developments now. If one takes a look at the ills of the political past, and yes, we're going to have to balance the rights of society, but the idea and the concept of 10 guilty people should walk free to avoid one innocent person being convicted. In this modern era, we've got forensic science, we've got a more established database, we've got different type of sciences. Realistically, we've got to look at what the nature of the crimes are, that they're gross violent crimes, murders, rapes, aggravated robberies, execution-style murders, gang-related violence. Those are the type of aspects that would render, and those are phenomena worldwide that have been looked at. Realistically, a serial killer, and we've had many of those, to sit and grant somebody 17 life sentences without the possibility of parole. You may, in a situation like that, the death penalty is applicable. For a person who's got a single conviction of marijuana possession, we are not going to be looking at a death penalty situation for. So the punishment must definitely, the more serious the offence, and the closer one must then take a look to it. And that must be a rare exception in the fact of certain violent crimes, which are not just simply witness-related issues or political-related issues, but they're forensic and they're science-related issues. If a person's also not fit to stand trial, they're not going to just simply be convicted and sentenced to death in the circumstances. It's not even a matter of being pro the death penalty or against the death penalty. It's basically, it's an aspect of, is that punishment befitting of the crime? If a person has gone ahead and savagely, brutally murdered and raped 17 or 16 women and killed children and crimes to that extent, the chances that they're going to be rehabilitated.
So let me ask you. So let me ask you this, Ian. With those parameters now already being put in place, as you have mentioned, what would be the legal steps to take in order for us as a country to reach a point where we're able to have the type of penalties that are befitting of the crime? What are the legal processes that need to take place, and what needs to change?
Well, in this type of situation, if you've got a rare example of a death penalty case, instead of it being adjudicated over by a single judge, utilize 3 judges like one would at an appeal level, so that it basically takes out the single discretion of a single individual that could be put to rest. If there's 3 people in agreement with it, if only 2 are in agreement, then they don't see the death penalty. The judiciary can change from that perspective. Also, the manner in which how the trials are conducted and investigated. Those can also improve utilizing the benefits of sciences, using the benefit of profiling more often. And psychology and pathology should also be utilized. We have got those infrastructures, albeit that in certain regards they're lacking in the resources. But they've got the qualifications and they've got the people out there to be able to deal with this and to improve them on how that can be adjudicated.
And finally, before I let you go, just your comments. Botswana issuing a press statement yesterday saying that they are going to be putting one murderer to death. He murdered his child as well as his wife or partner. Does that work in deterring crime? How does that affect the crime rate in Botswana?
Deterrence will not be really affected. At the end of the day, people will do what people will do, and they'll rely on defenses of crimes of passion and mental incapacity. Realistically, that is for the defense to go ahead and show why the person shouldn't be sentenced. Will it deter it? Doubtful. Unfortunately, it's not known as a major deterrent factor, but it will go ahead and amplify the necessary steps that need to be taken to deal with the crimes and for punishment to be meted out accordingly. At the end of the day, it's only once people also see that there is an adequate punishment and the punishment is extreme, may that then later on lead to a deterrence. But there is a definite time lag between the deterrence factor and the punishment factor.
Well, thank you very much for your insights this evening. So much appreciated. That's Mr. Ian Allis, a criminal law expert. Really, in summation, it's not about the death penalty being a deterrent, but more about an issue of justice, finding a penalty or a punishment, rather, that is befitting of the crime that has been committed. And he outlined there are certain ways that argument and that debate can be opened up once again in society.